So this one's like a two-part question and very important to us as we lead the community and certainly at our community college. So in an environment of free speech, when false information can be very harmful, how do leaders mitigate the impact of the incorrect information when we hear it? How do we recognize it? And then move us into when we talk to us a little bit about how we navigate those boundaries between our free speech, our hate speech, and then speech that may incite violence.
Again, a great question, very timely. And I know on the call, there are a lot of people that are involved in emergency communications, public affairs, and the challenge has always been real to capture those teachable moments to draw attention to issues and protective actions, but also making sure that the sourcing for information is consistent and reliable. And I tell you what, a couple of weeks ago, I came across a new Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma. And it talks about something I felt, in my, in the social media and the digital information world, where people are getting information from all different places. And it's not always reliable, vetted, or consistent, and it is opinionated. And that is sort of the battle that we have, is to make sure that we grab and keep people's attention to say, no, look here and trust us, these are the facts, and here's specifically what we need you to do. But we have people, again, getting their information from a variety of sources, and then, of course, expressing opinions. And that's not to say, or that's not to try to have a chilling effect on the right for people to have opinions, because as I sit here today, there are people in Maryland and across the world that have said, this was the wrong protective action, or this was too much, this was too little. I'm not going to wear my mask because you can't make me, or I'm not going to wear my mask because I don't think it works. So this has been a challenge throughout, and the challenge is in the name. With a novel coronavirus, it's new. So, we're learning as we go, not myself, of course, the medical experts are learning as they go as to what is the right decision. And when these decisions change or flip-flop, I think it undermines credibility, or undermines confidence in what that message is. These executive orders that restricted people from going to places of assembly, or made places of commerce stop through the business licensing regulation authority that we have, I think it surprised people. And I think there are still a lot of people out there that say, that's not the government I want. And here's what I have to say about that. And I guess it's what makes me sleep better at night is, whether I agree or not, I take confidence in the fact that the executive orders, the Maryland Annotated Code, got to where it is through a democratic process. This was legislatively created law. It was enacted after a due diligence process of public input and voting and so forth. And I'll be the first to admit, if after the fact society wants to go a different way and create certain reforms, or push harder in this direction, or pull back further here, there's a process for that. And I have a lot of great faith that that will happen. Judicial review. As we sit here and speak, and I'm sorry, I'm not really prepared to discuss the details, but I have been seeing more court cases, challenges, pop up across the country, pushing back at the elected leaders and their protective actions that they give. As a matter of fact, one real close to us in Pennsylvania, I just saw an update on the news about some new proceedings. So, it's a process. It's a civil process, and I think it is very difficult to try to get people to confidently understand your message and follow that message. And again, I'd love to hear some of their anecdotal experience from trying to make sure that the communication is constant and available to people, and grabbing their attention. Again, back to the point I was making with the Social Dilemma, a new documentary on Netflix. It started with a gentleman who worked for Google, and he was one of the social engineers that put together how these search engines work, and how information is pushed back to us. And this is all part of artificial intelligence. And we want that. We want our lives to be convenient and easy and have things recommended. Heaven knows it makes me spend more money than I probably should when I see things pop up, that I wasn't even thinking of. But there's another side too, where it also then directs you towards certain, information. And about 7 years ago, he saw that it was moving in the wrong direction, opened a Center for Ethics in New York City. The name escapes me at the moment. And this documentary, again, talks about how the social media sort of protocol works and the digital footprint that we all leave. And that is a wonderful tool when it's working in your favor, and and the information is coming from reliable sources. I think it is dangerous and can be unethical when that's not the case, or people that just get stubborn and don't want to agree. But this is a system we have. I work within it, and I think you give me more credit than I deserve. I work as part of a really tight team. Mr. Zeigler started to speak of it. The Maryland Emergency Management Agency got the lead early on because their job is coordination. And it really is, Mike, one of the most multi-cultural, diverse places I've ever worked, where people really do seem to value each other's opinion. It's made me a better person. I've learned a lot, great way to continue your career. And these are the folks that, have the tremendous challenge of then interpreting it. And that's the final point I want to make is, and I know I'm going to call him out, Sergeant Travis Nelson was in this call. And it was about a week ago where our roles reversed, and he was speaking with me to a college class and trying to show the difficulty and the balance, the political balance we all walk of trying to do the right thing, but also not go too far, and how each executive order required and got some legal vetting right away to make sure it was constitutionally sound, and that's debatable. I mean, we could say it is, and someone could say no, it's not. And last but not least, some sort of guidance, interpretive guidance, to say, this is what this means more specifically. And then when it gets to the community level, you'll still hear people that say, but does that mean me? So you're always going to have this sort of a debate. I think it's healthy. And I've been very proud and very overstimulated to be part of a team that's been trying to manage this. I feel like Mike will get a kick out of this. I feel like this is like the capstone class of my life. I've been through all these other things and emergencies, and we've been preparing for pandemics. We check that box every year, but to really see it in action and see all the pieces of society, emergency response, government, come together. Academia has been remarkable. And I think that is the next step is what does the academic world do with this moving forward, making it a cohesion case, or, now's the time for research evaluation to make it better if in fact this ever occurs. And let's cross our fingers and hope it does not.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hubbard. We really appreciate your comments and stimulating thought in other areas. And I too agree. We have many very senior leaders on this call this afternoon. And we are opening it for questions, and we are happy to unmute a mic. You want to raise your hand, let us know that you have a question, and we're glad to hear from you as well. We wanted this to be a discussion. We're bringing our best to make sure everything in our classroom is current and relevant and robust. So we'd like to hear from you. There are some questions stacking up in our chat. Let's see. Do we have anybody who wants to verbally ask a question? We'll start with that. If not, I'm going to start with those in the chat.
Kathy, can I double back real fast?
Sure.
And something that Mike had said right near the end, and a question to him, and I'm looking at the chat box here, is, how do we get the conversation started? And I think, he is spot on. It has to be a conversation. I think some of the most embarrassing moments in my life was when, and I'm going back decades, when there were various diversity trainings or initiatives that came into the workplace. And I would, have these conversations with dear friends who, as you ever notice, after you know somebody long enough, you really don't even see the color of their skin or their gender anymore. They're just your friend. And I would ask this person, I say, well, have you ever experienced this here? Because, I was blind to it. Maybe I either wasn't looking or was not in the environment. And I don't think I had a more disparaging moment when I heard the stories that they told me, much like Mr. Zeigler did. I've never been so embarrassed, ashamed, saddened, shocked. So I think that one of his key points was you have to have a conversation and understand what it is like to be someone else. You can't be someone else. You have to, the best you can do is try to ask and understand. And I think all of us in the academic setting now have a man to bring the conversation in. And again, working in different educational institutions, I'm getting to see what they're doing. I'm very proud of how fast they're doing it. And it's not just words. It's, well, that's great to say I support this or whatever, but what specifically do we do now? And, to revisit and ramp up and require additional training, which again, I think is old fashioned, but making sure it's part of the curriculum. it just astounds me, and I'm sure I'm as guilty as the next professor to say, most classes have a cohesion case or case studies. Why can't we bring in these kinds of issues? I mean, they're there in some cases, or just expand the history of the world, and it's a great opportunity. I think the academic setting will be the next group that pushes the ball forward, and I'm also, I think what keeps me young, my wife would disagree, is being around undergraduate students who are at that age, that formative age, and they're teaching me, how they see the world, what they think, and what they want their world to look like. And unfortunately, we've had more than enough chances with this. Sometimes true change requires organizational change, and culture requires a generation. And I'm very I'm happy to see some of the things I'm saying. I'm sorry, I'm prattling on now. I'll give it back to you.
Thank you very much. So I'll start with one question. And first, I'd like to tell you that Dr. Tony Hawkins is our Executive Vice President and Provost, and he's with us this afternoon. And this question is for both of you, or anyone in our audience as well, because you've all taught at a community college and taught at a university and taught in the training environment. Dr. Hawkins asked us, what are the research opportunities, or perhaps just the research questions, for educators to study what is happening to reclaim humanity?
Mike, I think it's your turn.
We can open it to our audience.
I'm trying to unmute. I'm sorry.
Sure. All right.
What are the research opportunities? Is that what he's asking?
Research opportunities, or perhaps the research questions. As we wish to reclaim humanity, we wish to restore the perception of legitimacy in so many communities of law enforcement that's fractured today. We really want to make that improvement. What are those questions?
There's so many. There's just a myriad of questions that need to be answered and need to be asked. That's for sure. I think we need to look back at what has transpired and what has worked and what has not worked. There's some things that have worked in community policing is one of those things that has worked pretty well in a lot of areas. And so you have to go back and look at the things that have worked in the past, and maybe we'll be able to progress us forward. I think that if you take and research and have the youngsters of today do a comprehensive research of the past, they will come up with some really good ideas of how to move forward and not let us continue in the same repetitive mode and be doing the same thing 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the road. That's just my opinion of it.
It's funny. That's a great point of view, because I think that one of the challenges right now is there's so much emotion in the air. And again, a lot of it is because of how we get our information and the coverage that it's seen. And I think that's great for transparency. But I also think that we have to be careful to make sure that there's balance. And I hope that the higher education institutions will take this charge for research. One of the trends that I saw in Frederick Community College and also in other institutes of higher learning is, amorphosis to, especially in business schools, to a better understanding of social responsibility with something called the triple bottom line: people, planet, and profit. And the people is the part with social justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just understanding that we can have a world that we live in that also includes these things. It's not just about capitalism. It's not just about money. And I'm starting to see that change, I think. But I don't know. I think that it is. I'm not an academic. I'm more of a practitioner. I do not have a PhD. I have close affiliations with folks like that, and all I can say is that the academic institutions I've been involved with, they're buzzing and they're chomping at the bit to dig into this research and understand, so that all of us here can have guidance. And also, full disclosure, we were starting to talk about the law enforcement. I have a son and a son-in-law who are in patrol in local government law enforcement, and it keeps me up at night. One of them is working as I speak, and I've had these conversations about him. And I said, I've been in government for 40 years now, and our job, I think, is to change with society. And if society wants reform, if they want a different style of policing, the first step we have to do is listen to them. And, and people are at all sorts of extremes on this issue. And I'm not a subject matter expert in law enforcement. I'm just a participant. And listen to my sons. And I think they would agree that there are some things now that, the system hasn't kept up with, and we use law enforcement as our only tool to respond to certain instances where that's not the best tool. And they're stuck in the middle. They're the ones that are getting the 911 call being sent out there, and then, all bets are off. So I'm happy to see at least a lot of research, a lot of restructuring going toward what do we want policing today to look like and tomorrow, because it's a tool for the public, and the public tells us what they want out of their fire, emergency management, police, and so forth. So just a few thoughts, I try to be progressive. It's hard because I am stubborn and old, but if we listen more, I think we'll be in a better place as we move forward.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. So we do wish to have these hard discussions, these brave topics. And Dr. Mike Caruso has a question for us. He's asking us, what do we say to our teachers and to our administrators who believe that we should avoid engaging students in these tough conversations, the conversations that deal with racial justice and inequity, and during an election year? So how do we engage them while maintaining that objectivity? And how do we talk about the political polarization on both sides that may dictate candor? It's a multi-layered question. If you want me to repeat any of it, it's just, what do we say to these administrators and teachers who feel we shouldn't be having tough conversations? What's your justification to have them?
Well, I think it's certainly, the question I would ask them is, why shouldn't we have them? And what harm can come from them? Are some of the questions that need to be asked to those people who are saying that we shouldn't be having them. And in addition to that, the reason why we should have them is because it gives other people insight into other people's feelings and other people's emotions and how other people feel about things that are going on. And I think we need to understand each other and get a collective understanding of each other, so that we can at least have some knowledge of why people do what they do and why people respond the way they do and act the way they do. I know that, all the stuff that I've experienced in my life, I could be, frankly, a very bitter person. I really could if I had taken that route, but I elected not to take that route. I elected to take the route of, I'm not going to be bitter. I'm going to do things to make these people who don't understand what they're doing better. And I think it has a lot to it. And that's a tough conversation. And certainly it is. And some of these people don't want to have it because it is a tough conversation. But we need to have it for that and for many other reasons, I'm sure. But I just think that we really need to make people understand each other's differences, cultural, the diversities in their cultures, and so forth and so on.
Thank you.
And Mike, I'd like to ask you another question. It's in our chat box. So as we make change in our organizations, they're becoming more racially and perhaps gender diverse, but there's still a predominant white role in many leadership positions. So for those of us who are coming from that Caucasian place, what is our role? How can we ensure racial equity in our workplace? What would you like to tell us?
Well, I think you just have to be fair about it and fair-minded about it, no matter how it transpires in the future. I think fairness is what everybody's looking for, just fairness across the board. Level playing fields is where it's at. If you make the field level and those who don't get the job don't get it, then they probably shouldn't have the job. But I just think that, don't get frustrated when something doesn't go the way you need it to. Try to understand that, and when you turn that coin the other way, and you get to see the backside of that coin. I see why some of the things are going on in the world the way they are, because people are getting resistant to the turn of the coin, and you can't do that. You've got to stay, you've got to stay focused on making things equal, making things fair for everybody.
Thank you very much. To our audience, we'd love to open up your microphone if you have a question. I see that there are some folks who are asking to reply back to our speakers. If you raise your hand or just unmute yourself, we're glad to call on you.
And before they do that, let me tell you those 10. Does anybody know those 10 two-letter words that I mentioned earlier? The 10 two-letter words of success that my dad used to drive in our heads all the time. 10 two-letter words. If it is to be, it is up to me. Very simple. He used to make me repeat that so much when I'd get, down about something or get in the gutter about something or wasn't focused and wasn't, wasn't taking the challenge. What are those 10 two-letter words? If it is to me, it's up. If it is to be, it is up to me.
Thank you for sharing that.
Kathy, this is Joe Vince. I just want to thank you for having this. It's a great. The speakers are great, and we need to be talking about this. But I think we also have to look at how we teach. And I teach right now I'm teaching an intelligence analysis course, an intro course. And what I see from the students is that many, not all courses, you read the text, they tell you what it says, and then you regurgitate that back and stay in there. And I just gave them their first briefing paper 2 weeks ago, and you thought I put an atomic bomb on them because I gave them the format. It was on the Virginia Tech shooting, and they said, "Well, wait a minute, you didn't. Where's the example? Where's the where? Well, that's what you have to come up with." And I said, "Besides that, you're college students in a college atmosphere. You should have a lot of ideas on this. Are you going to have them all? No. Analysts don't. We work in teams, like Dr. Hubbard said. We come up with collective ideas, but you should have some to start with, and you have to, this is what we call critically thinking, analytically thinking, and we don't do that a lot. The other thing is, many times we try to get down and say, okay, here's the answer to this. When we see from the pandemic that big issues, big problems don't have one solution, it's not one glove fits all. There are many solutions that have to go with this. And we've seen that with the experience that our healthcare workers are having. And it relates back physiology to what we're seeing in our major cities, mostly our high crime areas. And you take a look at the healthcare workers during the peak of this pandemic. They're working 12 or 14 hours a day. They're not getting sufficient rest. They're not eating right. They're getting depressed, and we could go on. And so what do we see? Suicide rates up, drug use is up with our healthcare workers. Okay, let's take that back to all these people that live in low income, high crime areas. They see death all the time. Our healthcare workers are having to put their cell phones so loved ones can say goodbye. You don't think that gets them every day that they're seeing that? It's traumatic. So you're around drive-by shootings. You're seeing children getting shot. You're seeing all these horrific things. Every single day you're getting punched with them. And so what do they have? They have depression. I can't do anything. We're not going to get any better. And it's hard. It's difficult. And I agree with Mr. Zeigler. I think my father and his father talked together. But, it's hard to come out of that. And so what happens? You start seeing drug addiction. You start seeing literally, you can take healthcare workers and you can take brain scans of people that live in those high crime areas, and they can actually see it's affecting the brain. And then you add in areas like Baltimore City that allows people to live in houses with lead salt paint and lead salt pipes, and that alone you can't get out of your brain, and so that makes you crazy. Like Freddie Gray, I couldn't understand when I saw how that man could survive that. And so we know what's happening. We have to fix that. Then let's look at police officers in those cities. What we're seeing last year, for the first year ever, more police officers killed themselves through suicide than died in the line of duty. And so what are we seeing? Well, we're seeing a conflict because we haven't worked 12-hour shifts. And then, as an officer told me last week in an adult class I had, I got done at 3:30 from the shift. I had to be in court at 8:30. I had a 10:30 court date. I had a 12:30 court date. Then I was back on my shift at 3:30, and I got 2 hours of sleep. Okay, now I'm going to be really great at talking to people and doing my job right. And you can't continue to do this, and we do. So why do we have suicide rates? Why do we have officers literally acting not the way they are? Because of what we've put them in, as Dr. Hubbard said. And I think we have to start looking at a lot of these ideas, and it goes back to how we teach as well.
Well, thank you so much for sharing so many great topics, so much work ahead for us, especially about inequity and the conditions that some of our students are coming before they ever get to us. So thank you for that. Do we have any other? We have 5 minutes and we will take one more question. Do we have anyone else who wants to ask a question?
So I'll sort of connect a few, because it looks like we've got one left over from Steve in the chat, and then one that we sort of half hit earlier. Steve's is what active role should white administrators have in ensuring racial equity in the workplace? And then a little bit farther back up in the chat, it was sort of how do you open the discussion, like specific strategies for it. And the one quick preface I'll give to that, to sort of link all of this, even with some of what Tony and Mike were saying earlier, is a lot of what, I am a ginger white male. The worst discrimination I have ever received is basically that my hair is red, and South Park didn't like that for 5 years. But even for me, I'm staring at sort of the world as it is and going, there's not a lot of, on the large scale, like agency that you feel. And sort of what we just heard is more of that on sort of the ground level of, if I'm sitting here going, every major thing around me is going wrong, and the amount of things that I can do about it is decreasing significantly, and then you live that as your entire life, whether it's a healthcare worker or it's just that is the society or the environment that you're sitting in, a lot of what becomes useful is knowledge of not only both the examples and data on what works, like what does function, like community policing has statistical benefits. This is actually the history of what this particular reform has. This is what this union's effect has been. This is what this policy has been. And I think that sort of gets mirrored a little bit at the personal level, but in terms of the research opportunities, that's where, like, I would want to see a lot of the stuff get done, is figure out where all this stuff is, so that when that conversation shows up, and this is the reason to have it, is you're going to have it anyway. Have it early, and then learn enough that you have it informed as you go, so you can build into all of this stuff. So I do not know what the role of an old white administrator is, because I am 28 years old. I'll leave that to Mike and Mark.
Did you just call us old, Alan? That was really smooth the way you did that.
Yeah, you call old guys.
At your service, sir.
Wow, right near the end, you wait till the end. It is an outstanding question, and I can only tell you what I've seen, and I'm not sure if it's working or not. I can't be the judge of that. But, you have to surround, Mike said it earlier, you have to surround yourself with people that do not look and think like you. You've got to induce diversity. I think a lot of people think that's forcing it, but that's not how I'm using the word. You have to go and, shore up your blind spots and put together a diverse panel of advisors and people in power. And I'm seeing the latest trend is a lot of big law enforcement agencies, governments, educational institutions appointing chief diversity officers, someone whose job it is to be as progressive as can be, to do that research, to look out there and feed it back into the system. So that's a structural change I think is good, but you're exactly right. I have no credibility. I can't think like a person of color. I can't think like a woman, because I have not been in that perspective. So you need to go and get that pursuit. I see, and Mike probably saw this too, is a lot of the legacy systems, especially in public safety, where you've got these merit systems and you might have a labor organization. There are things baked in with, like, seniority is one of the most sacrosanct things there. And seniority itself it produces a bias, because if you did not start recruiting or bringing in diverse applicants till later, well, now you're standing in line. So it's like how many years does it take to get to the front of the line? And I was really proud to be part of an organization before this one where, we turned upside down the promotional system and said, and we're arguing with people like, do you really believe that an applicant that scores 1 point higher on a promotional exam is that much better than the other person? Shouldn't it be a little broader than that? Should be a little more, you know, and everybody comes into the interview and they've got their religion. They're saying all the right things and they're Mr. or Mrs., you know, fire and police department. We can look a little deeper at your body of work and the knowledge and understanding that a lot of these systems, I think, just need to be changed to allow it. And then of course you get the, well, you know, we don't get enough applicants. Well, then there's a problem with your recruiting. You know, you're not recruiting properly, you're not modeling, you're not mentoring, or your applicant pool is too tight. So now you got me all fired up, Alan. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, gentlemen, we appreciate you serving as our presenters today. We appreciate you, our colleagues, joining us for this great conversation. Our next topic, and we'll invite you again, we'll keep it to just an hour, is due process. So if you want to join us, due process, we'll let our two esteemed speakers off the hook and we'll get some new folks, but perhaps they'll join us in the audience. So we really appreciate your support for this collective today, but most of all, we appreciate your dedication, your lifetime of service to individuals, to communities, to our state, and to our nation. So my hat is off to you. Thank you for joining us. And we respect your time, and we will close our first collective and invite you to the next one. Be ready for due process.
Thank you for having us. Great to work with you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.